Ladies and gentlemen, the Newton Nomadic Theater presents Story Slam.
We're a theater based in Newton. It's a very curious operation. We do very, very simply staged theater, but with the best actors you're going to find in the Boston area. And they're amazing shows, and we do them in non-theater spaces all around Newton. So, for example, our last show back in the spring, we performed at an artist studio up on across from Crystal Lake. We're in Boca Bella's restaurant in Auburndale, the Woburn Library, somebody's living room here in Newton, Dungaren's pub. So it's all intimate spaces and amazing theater. So I would urge you, if you haven't come to one of our shows, get on our mailing list. And we've got a new show opening on September 30th. It'll run all through October on Friday and Saturday nights. And it's going. This one I think could be the best we've done yet. It's going to be an amazing show called Someone Who'll Watch Over Me. It's played by Frank McGinnis, featuring 3 new actors who've never worked with us before. So we're very excited about this. But anyway, let's get on to the Nomad Story Slam. The way this works is I've got the hat here, and people who showed up tonight put their name in the hat to tell a story. Any of you, if you'd like, at intermission or anytime, you can put your name in the hat to tell a story. The theme tonight is out of the blue. So somehow the story should be connected with out of the blue. It should be roughly 5 minutes long, and it should be true. So that's the deal. Pardon? True and yeah, and about you, not like something happened to some guy in China that I heard about. You know? So, but let's see. I think I will kick it. I think I'll kick it off. I'll tell you a story. Get this ball rolling here. So about 15 or 20 years ago, my wife, Mari, was in a play down at the Boston Center for the Arts down in the South End. And on a Saturday night, the cast and the crew decided after the play they were all going to go out for a pint somewhere. So we all ended up at this bar at the bottom of Mission Hill on Tremont Street. I can't remember what it's called. It's an Irish pub there. And we had a big crowd, 15, 20 people, and one big long table. And we were having a great old time. And I was down the one end of the table, and Mari was, halfway down the table. And at some point, I see this guy come. He wasn't with our group. Somebody came over this table and is talking to Mari. And he's gesturing, and he's kind of loud. And all of a sudden, I realized he's got this funny voice. And I realized, oh, he's deaf. He's got that deaf voice, And he's gesturing, and I realized by this weird coincidence, Mari and I had just taken sign language classes that had just ended the month before. So we were both like beginner sign language folks. So Mari's having a great time with this deaf guy, and she's practicing her sign language, and he's teaching her new signs. And so anyway, the night goes on, and slowly, people in our group start going home one by one. It gets to be the end of the night, and it's finally down to me and Mari and the deaf guy. And we're the last 3. And Mari's already agreed that we're going to give him a ride home. He lives way up the top of Mission Hill. So we're just getting set to go. The bar's getting ready to close. And Mari stands up and turns around with her back to the deaf guy and says, "I think he took my wallet." I said, "What? Are you sure?" She said, "No, I'm not sure. It was here, and I don't see how anybody else could have taken it." And so we start looking around, and now we tell the bartender her wallet's missing, and he comes over, and he's looking, and the deaf guy's looking, and we're all looking for the wallet, and it's nowhere there. And we're having private conversations. We keep turning to "You sure?" I don't know. And so anyway, we walk out the door, out to the corner, the 3 of us. And as soon as we go out the door, the deaf guy scoots down the side street and disappears in an alley. And damn, he must have had the wallet. And so we're in the corner, we're commiserating, we're saying, how much cash did you have? I don't know. And should we call right now to cancel the credit cards? Should we go home? And as we're talking about this, all of a sudden, here he comes out of the alleyway, comes walking back up. It turns out he's just taking a pee in the alley. I don't know why he didn't use the men's room, but That was it. So now he's back, and he's like, okay, he's waiting for his ride home. So now it gets completely surreal, because now it's like, what do we do? And we keep turning around. I don't know. Should we take him? And we keep, so we can't do the lip reading thing. We keep backing on. So just as this is happening, a police car pulls up by coincidence, and like a door down. Mari says, I'm going to go talk to the cops. And I said, all right, I'll keep him here, So she goes off, and she's talking to the cops, and I'm talking to the deaf guy, and this is going on for a few minutes, and she comes back and says, she told them what the whole story, and they said, well, what do you want us to do? And she said, well, I want my wallet back. And they said, well, do you want to press charges? And she said, well, I don't even know he has the wallet. I don't want to press charges. I just want my wallet back. And they're like, look, lady, there's two things. Either we press charges or we don't. If we press charges, then we'll go and we'll take him and we'll search him. And so she's like, nah, I don't feel like I can do this. And so she sends him on the way. So Mari comes back, and she's telling me all this with her back to the deaf guy, and we're going to this. And now, and he's getting antsy, like, why are we still in the street corner? And it's all like, what do we do? And then, out of the blue, this wasn't a plan. This wasn't a great thought. It just happened, like, in an instant. I looked over, and I realized he had, what do you call them? Sweatpants on, baggy sweatpants. And I could see on one side there was something in one of the pockets. It could have been his keys. It could have been anything. So just out of the blue, I just took 2 steps, reached into his pocket, and grabbed what was there and pulled it out, and it was her wallet. And we both let out this noise, and he made this really weird noise, and put his hand up and skulked off into the night. That's my story. Well, that's curious. Next story is Mari Jackson.
Thank you. I haven't really rehearsed this one or anything, but I'll just let you know anyway. I'm feeling a bit nervous. I love the Wellfleet Oyster Fest. It's one of my favourite little festivals in the year, and it's grown from, it first started when it was sort of damp and about a couple of hundred people going through, to nowadays when there's 80,000 people there eating oysters and learning about shellfishing over a beautiful weekend, the weekend after Columbus Day. And 2 years ago, Jerry actually has no time at all for the Wellfleet Oyster Fest because he loves the oysters, but it's suddenly shoulder to shoulder. It's like, I don't know, Christmas Eve in Macy's or something. It's and I thrive on this. I absolutely love it. So Jerry had taken our daughter on alternative activities, and they ended up in the library, and we agreed that I was allowed to go into the belly of the beast and go shopping and get me oysters and so on. And so I'm shoulder to shoulder with them, or actually I'm shoulder to elbow with 80,000 people. When my cell phone goes and I think, oh, is it time to go already? So I look down, and it's a number that I don't recognize, and a little voice when I answer the phone says, "This is Alyssa." And tears streamed down my face, and I couldn't breathe. And I said, "I'll call you back. I'm in the middle of Wellfleet with 80,000 people." Many years before, Jerry and I were foster parents. And we had a little baby girl. And she was 6 months old when she came to live with us. And she was 2.5 when she left. And it broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart. I woke up upstairs every night for 6 months, walking and looking for the baby in my sleep. And I sent her home with a photograph album with 200 pictures in it, and each picture had a little 1 or 2 line story about it, about her growing up, so that she would know what the first couple of years of her life were like. And I gave them to her grandmother. She was going to go and live with her dad, and I gave it to his mom because I was afraid he might throw it out. And so this was 11 years had passed, and I had always dreamed that when she was like 18 or something, she would try and find us and just come and say hi. And instead of that, it was totally out of the blue, in the middle of Wellfleet, in the middle of a crowd of 80,000 people, that a very, very brave 13-year-old called some people that she had only just found out existed. She had never been told she had been a foster child. She always wondered why there were no photographs of her growing up. And she was now back in foster care. And her social worker had tracked us down, and she was given a school assignment which required baby pictures. And that's why this very, very brave 13-year-old made contact with us totally out of the blue in Wellfleet. We have seen her. She's been to Story Slams. She rigs wires for us and so on. And we're very, very glad to have reconnected. That's all. That's my story.
Yeah, Alyssa is now part of our Newton Nomadic crew. We've roped her in too. So, let's see. Robert Solomon.
Oh, those lights are unbelievable. I don't see anyone. December 3rd, 1978. That's the day I quit smoking. It's also the day my son Chris was born. I don't look that old, but this story is about visiting Chris. Beginning of July, end of June, my son Chris moved from Montreal, where he was a professor at McGill. He's a biologist, to the Poughkeepsie area, where he is now a lead scientist at the Carey Institute, which is an environment think tank. So I was going to go visit him because it's easier to get to Red Hook than it is to Montreal when you're in a wheelchair. So the beginning of July, I made reservations for the train, and I told Chris that I would find a way to get to his house in Red Hook from Rhinecliff train station. Anybody here ever been to Rhinecliff train station? So to get to Rhinecliff, I had to take the train to New York City, and then north 2 hours to Rhinecliff. And if you've seen me around town, you've seen me driving around my wheelchair. I figured I would just drive my chair from the Rhinecliff station to Red Hook, which is only 7 miles. And my chair has 18 hours of time on it, so it wasn't going to be a problem. So I called the state police and I said, is it okay to do that? The state police of New York. And they said, no, there are no bicycle lanes on that road, and it's 55 miles an hour. You don't want to be on that road. So I had to find a way to get to Red Hook, and I started calling ambulance services. And nobody had any room. Everyone was booked up. Talked to the Dutchess County senior groups, and they couldn't help me. So finally, I was able to get a reservation on an ambulette that would pick me up in Rhinecliff, take me the 7 miles to Red Hook. I would spend 5 days with my grandchildren, and then I would go back. $160. So I was looking for alternatives the whole time, the whole month of July, and at the beginning of August, I called my son and I said, look, I'm going to take my folding wheelchair, which I haven't been in 5 years, and I'll go that way so you can pick me up at the train station, and that'll settle everything. Well, the night before I packed, opened up the folding wheelchair, Thursday morning, I got in the wheelchair. My suitcase is here. How am I going to get the suitcase downstairs? Because I got to go this way. Figured out going downstairs, got there, waited for the ride, which didn't show up. It turned out the ride went to South Station. So I had to get to South Station for a train that left in an hour and 15 minutes. I went back upstairs and got my power chair. And I had canceled the ambulette. Got back upstairs, got my power chair, went to the T station, all the way down to Park Street, where I hooked up with some MBTA people who, as some of you may know, I'm connected with them. And they got me to the train station with only minutes to spare. In the meantime, I was on the phone with ambulette companies all the way down to the train station because I didn't have any way to get to Red Hook from Rhinecliff. So finally, halfway to New York City, I found an ambulette company that would take me. And it would be $160 round trip. So as it turns out, it was going to cost that much anyway. Had a fabulous time with my grandchildren. Got on the train Monday morning, which was 60 minutes, about an hour late, coming out of Rhinecliff Station. Got into New York City with 10 minutes to spare to get up to the main deck of Penn Station and catch my train to Boston. Well, the elevator was broken. So I missed the train, and that was the 2 o'clock train to Boston. Got upstairs, don't know what I'm going to do. The train station manager said, okay, we're going to put you on the fast train, the Acela, which will get you in 15 minutes after the slow train. So that's great, fabulous. This was fabulous. My weekend was going to end great. I get to Boston, wait for my bag off the train. The porter said, we'll bring it up to the end of the platform. Just go up there and wait. I waited for 5 minutes, no bag, and the train pulled out with my bag in it. And I went to the baggage service office. They told me, don't worry, it's just going to be cleaned. We'll get your bag and we'll send it to you by taxi. Well, at 10 o'clock at night, I got a call from this woman in the baggage center who said, they still haven't found your bag yet, but we're going to get it for you, and we'll send it by cab first thing tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning. So I wait Tuesday morning. It's 10 o'clock already. I don't hear from them. I call. This woman told me she would be there. She wasn't there. She doesn't get in until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The station manager at South Station said, we don't know anything about your bag, and you didn't check it, so we're not even responsible for it. So there were a couple of ways this could have gone. I could have started swearing and screaming and throwing the phone across the room, but instead I called Terry Crowley in the mayor's office. And this story is about Terry Crowley. She called the station, and I had my bag in a few hours. It was unbelievable. So that's my story.
Well, let's hear it for Robert. Come on. Yeah. You know, all that sort of like the trains leave and whatever, get my heart pounded. I'm going to miss, you know, all that missing the connections. Anyway, let's see, where is it? Mike Riley. For people who've been to these before, you probably know Mike Riley. He's a regular.
I have done a lot of these, and I usually try to tell stories that are, you know, kind of funny. This one is not funny, really, at all. It happened about 25 years ago. Okay, sure. I said I usually try to tell kind of funny stories, and this one really is not funny at all. It happened about 25 years ago. I was in my office. My secretary said, there's a guy named William Miller on the phone for you. I didn't recognize the name, but I wasn't busy. I picked the phone up. I said, "Hi, Mike Riley, can I help you?" And he said, "This is William Miller, Mr. Riley. Do you remember me?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't." And he said, "Well, I'm Tommy Miller's father." And my heart clutched, and I broke out into a sweat. Because 2 years before this phone call, I had represented a 13-year-old girl who had been charged with sexually molesting Tommy Miller, who was a 5-year-old boy. And it was an odd case. And when I got involved in the case, it made no sense to me. She seemed like a really nice young woman. She came from a very nice family. She did very well in school. There was no indication anywhere that she had done some really horrific things, this little boy was saying. And as I got into the case and I started working on it, problems with the allegations began to come up. The little boy had said, for example, that one of these times happened last year, the day before Halloween. Well, we could show that my client, who lived next door and used to babysit for this kid every day after school, because the parents were divorced, the father had custody, she was the next door neighbor, she babysat. Well, this particular day, he said it happened, we could show she was at a doctor's appointment. And other parts of his story started to make no sense. We managed to get some medical records. The young boy had a lot of kind of psych problems, had a lot of issues with making up things. And it was a case that had to go to trial because the Commonwealth could not walk away from allegations like that. My client was never going to and could never admit to allegations like that. So we had to go try the case up in the Lowell Superior Court, big old pile of stone. And from the time I showed up from the trial, Tommy Miller's father, I didn't know his first name, but his father was there, and his father was just glaring at me with hatred. Just, I mean, every chance he get, he would catch my eye and stare at me. These are horrible cases to try, just terrible cases to try. And they put the young boy on the stand, and my job is to cross-examine him, which, you just don't want to do, but it's your job. I cross-examined him for about 45 minutes, and the morning break came. I went in the bathroom. I was coming out of the bathroom, and the father comes up to me and says to me, "You are a monster. I don't know how you live with yourself. You're despicable. I hope this happens to your kids. I hope you find out what it feels to have this happen to your kids." And walks away, leaves. I was upset, but, it's part of the job. I go back in, I finish my cross-examination, we finish the trial. My client gets found not guilty. I was happy about it. It was one of those rare occasions where I was pretty sure I was representing an innocent person, and she was found innocent, and that was great. Now, out of the blue, 2 years later, he calls me. And I immediately start thinking of, where are my kids? What could he have done? What could this call be about? He said, "Mr. Riley, I owe you an apology." He said, "For the last 2 years, I've been involved in a custody fight with my wife. We just finished the trial. My lawyer called her best friend as a witness at the trial. And her best friend testified that my wife had convinced Tommy to tell this story, had made it up in order to make the case that he wasn't safe when he was staying with me. She testified that she was at the beach with my wife and with Tommy, where my wife was rehearsing the testimony to prepare him for the trial." And he said, I feel terrible. He said, I know what I said to you in the court that day. The moment I said it, I knew that was wrong and I shouldn't have done it. I've asked my lawyer to call your client's family and tell them, but I had to call you directly because I owe you an apology and I feel bad." I said, "Mr. Miller, I appreciate your courage in making this call. I appreciate you apologizing. And, good luck to you and Tommy. I don't know what else to say." And we both hung up. And I don't know why. I'm not that proud of it, but I sat and cried for about 5 minutes. And that's what happened.
What a story, Mike. It's unbelievable. And he's right. He usually does tell funny stories, but that was quite a story. This whole story slam, this Nomad Story Slam, this started 3 years ago. And it started because we spend the summer down the Cape. And one day I saw this poster. And it was this bright yellow poster, and there's a big mosquito on it. And it said in big letters, "The Mosquito Story Slam." And I was kind of intrigued. And it was this, event modeled after the moth radio hour. There's the moth, the mosquito. So I went down there. We went down there to see this thing, and we got there, and I thought I could tell a story. So I threw my name in a hat, and that got me going. And so I became a regular at the Mosquito. So then we came back at the end of the summer up here, and the theater was starting up. I thought I could steal their idea. And I did. So we started our own, story slam here, and basically did exactly what I learned at the Mosquito. So anyway, tonight I want to invite Caitlin up here, who's one of the two founders of the Mosquito, to come tell us a story.
Okay. I tend to think that the age of 9 is thereabouts a time when many kids' lives get rocked by something. So when I was around the age of 9, I was coming back with my mom from Cambridge, heading home to New York City in the Pinto with the seatbelts locked behind the seats, and Mom's got a True Blue cigarette on the steering wheel, and we're heading down 95. And she said, "Do you want to know who your father is?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right." I mean, I kind of until then had never asked, and I thought about a couple of different options. Not religious, but Jesus Christ was one of them. Laurence Olivier, because we were both addicted to Wuthering Heights. Maybe there was a third, but and maybe the third ended up being just who my father was. Turned out my godfather was my father. And I was thrilled. I remember opening up my little warm can of V8 and being like, this is fantastic. I grew up on his records. I grew up on his books. I grew up jumping into his shows when he would allow me to be there. He was a magical man. And so that was fine with me. Up until my birthday, and then he didn't send me anything. Now, he didn't know I knew, but I remember my roll-top desk. I never used it as a desk. I remember my stationery, and I wrote him a letter, and I said, I don't think I said the word bullshit, but in my mind, I was like, this is bullshit, and I don't give a damn about your wife. In my mind, I know I said that. I wrote something, scribbled and misspelled, and he was confused, and so he called my mother, and she was like, well, yeah, I told her. He was still confused, so we came to New York and we walked around the reservoir, and I cried and I cried. And every time we got together, when we did get together twice a year, Chinese restaurant, walk around the reservoir, I cried, and I was always appreciative that he let me cry. And as the years continued, I was a secret. I was his friend. I was his goddaughter. It's not easy to keep that secret as a child. Later on in life, with my lovely Brazilian therapist who told me to get my toenails professionally painted and to take my father's name. Now, my dad had asked me to take his name for years, and I sort of thought, well, that's a nice little pity party gesture. But, I mean, I love my father, but I was like, I'm fine. I don't need to take your name. All I wanted was for him to tell the world who I was. I did not care about his name or his family. I love his family, but my family. Anyway, she was right. And you jump through a lot of hoops to change your name, but I changed my name. And in the Village Voice, there it was. And it changed everything. I mean, I was legitimate for him, not just for me. And I went to one of his rehearsals, because for many years I did his shows, and I couldn't tell anyone who my father was. And I went to one of his rehearsals 11 years ago. And he always starts them by standing in a circle, to sing Wild Mountain Time. And I got in the circle with him, and he said, I want you all to meet my daughter. For the first time, he said it, as far as I'm concerned, to the world. And it was not long after that, he took a plane to Switzerland against his doctor's orders, and he had a stroke, and he died. And I cried, but I was so the full circle, the closure of taking the name, but having my name said. I was at peace. So thank you for that out of the blue announcement, Mom, because I'm happy.
Wow, Caitlin, that was a hell of a story. And Mom's here, too. Let's pull a few of these out, of the little mini stories. See if we have what we've got here. Out of the blue, the tree limb hit the bridge of my nose. I was sober and glad I had a popsicle to put. I'm glad I had a popsicle to put on it. I like that one. Oh, this one's a little familiar. Oh, I see what happened here. I think I know you'll figure it out. Out of the blue, my mom told me my godfather was my father. Out of the blue, I teamed up with the crazy guy that said, "Hey, let's start a theater company." Oh, I know that guy. Mike, do you want you got to run, right? Where's Mike? We're gonna have Mike tell another story. He's got to run, but we'll get a second one out of him before he leaves.
Not quite as somber. The second job I ever had in my life, the first one was doing groceries, bagging groceries in a supermarket, was at Dunkin' Donuts. It was the Dunkin' Donuts on Mass Ave in front of the Christian Science Church, diagonally across from Symphony Hall. That whole row of buildings has been torn down now, but there used to be a row of buildings there. And I worked for Nick, a Greek guy. Nick and his brother George, they owned all of the Dunkin' Donuts in downtown Boston. This was a time when all the Dunkin' Donuts were out in the suburbs, and you used to drive to them. And it was a big new deal. I was 15 years old. It was a big deal to have Dunkin' Donuts in the city, and Nick and George were the guys who first tried to do it. And Nick was very good to me, kind of took me under his wing. He taught me how to be a donut baker, which as a 15-year-old kid, getting paid as a donut baker was incredible. I mean, I was making crazy money for a young kid. And he tried to give me life advice. He would sit and he would ask me what I was going to do when I got out of high school, and I said, I'm going to go to college. And he said, Meek, he always called me Meek. Meek, the college is the bullshit. Business is for a man. Business, you make the money. And I would say, well, Nick, really, I'd like, because even at that age, I kind of knew, I said, I'd really like to be a lawyer. And he would say, Meek, the lawyer is the bullshit. He said, the lawyer work for the business. The business is the man. But he was very good to me, and one of the things that I used to do was work the night shift there. It would be, you'd come in at 4 and you'd work until 9. And from 4 to 6, there'd be 2 other people there. It'd be kind of busy, people coming in and out. After 6, you'd be there by yourself, and it was quiet. It was pretty dead. And I was working there one night, during the summer, I'm school vacation, and guy comes in, orders a cup of coffee, sitting there reading the newspaper, and he kind of gives me the signal to come over. And out of the blue, he says to me, "You must get lonely in here at night, huh?" And I said, "Well, not really. I mean, people come in and out." And he said, "But, there must be lonely times here." So I said, "Well, maybe 10, 15 minutes, nobody coming in would be the most. But other than that, it's not bad." He goes back to reading his newspaper. So about 20 minutes later, he kind of gives me the signal again. And I come over, and I notice as I'm walking over that there's nobody else in the store now. It's just me and him. And he's got the newspaper that he's holding, and he says, "I've got a gun in my hand. Give me all the money." Now, I was a smart 15-year-old kid, and I had been observing this guy for about a half an hour. So I knew he didn't have a gun underneath that newspaper. I knew it was a bluff. So I stared him in the eye, and I reached down and grabbed the newspaper. And he had a gun pointing right at my stomach. And in a lifetime of doing stupid things, that's the stupidest thing I've ever done. And the only reason I'm here is because he was much cooler than I was. So I threw my hands up, I turned around, I got a bag, I put all the money in the bag. If he didn't think I was a wise guy, I would have asked if he wanted a donut and coffee with that. I gave it to him, he ran out. So I call the police, I call Nick. The police come down, they take the statement. Nick comes down, he shuts the store down. He calls me in his office, he says, "Tell me what happened." So I tell him the whole story. And he looks me in the eye and he says, "Mick, this is the business. You do not die for the business." Which was the best advice I ever got from Nick, and I've tried to follow it my whole life.
I think we'll take a few-minute break, and anybody can put your name in the hat if you're game, and fill out those little things. We'll get a few more of those little mini stories, and we'll be back with some more stories in about 5 minutes.
He has outed everything. I might as well say a few words. My friend and I, one summer when we were both 19, decided we'd go to Aspen to study with Richard Dyer Bennett and become minstrels. And it was fun. It was fun. But afterwards, we decided to hit Utah, where I was born and where my family came from, and we could stay in my uncle's house, which I remember as being very comfortable and delightful. So we went there, and nobody was home. So I said, well, I suppose they're on vacation or something, but I can get in. So I managed to open a window, and we both crawled in. We were both very tired and hungry, and we ate everything that was in the icebox, and then we went up and took wonderful showers. And we'd been traveling quite a long ways. And we spent the night there, and we're delighted. And then I showed Doris our old house, which had just been sold to the Mormon church as as a great place or something or other. And I got home, told my parents, and they said, "But honey, Uncle Burton and Aunt Elise moved out 2 years ago." And that's that.
Let's hear it for Robin. For the whole family to get stories for us. It's great. Out of the blue, we were at a stoplight near Amherst, and a beautiful red cardinal landed on our car windowsill and looked through the window at us. He was probably admiring himself in the reflection, but he could have picked a parked car for that. I like that. Out of the blue, my dog walking around on the... Oh, out of the blue, I found my dog walking around on the dining room table. That's good. Could we get Harry Mishkin up here, please?
So, I haven't been here before, and out of the blue, I picked up the Newton tab, and I see Story Slam, and it's like 6 minutes away from where I live, and I do tell stories. And out of the blue, one of the places I do it is out of the blue art gallery. Their story space in Central Square. But this is an out of the blue story in a sense. I call it Travels with Charlie, and you'll see why by the end. The year is 1969. It is the spring of 1969, and I had graduated high school in 1968 in a small town 20 miles north of New York City, and Spring Valley, just if you have to know. To prove I'm not a fictitious character. So 1968, 1967, my friends and I are watching this crazy phenomena, the Summer of Love. People streaming to the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco, and it's just starting to build. I got to get to California. Oh, by the way, the other out of the blue thing is that this is Nomadic Theater, and I am a nomad, or at least I was. I did this work-study program where you pack up every 3 months and go someplace and work. So I sort of had a flexibility. And in the spring of 1969, I just finished a co-op job, and I just got to get to California. So I happen to be in New York City. I'm looking on a bulletin board in Greenwich Village, and I see a card, a couple of families going to California looking for riders, and I hook up with these folks. It's a guy and his wife and 2 kids and another couple upstate, semi-upstate New York with infants and a dog. And we're going to take a slow trip, and that's okay with me. We're going to go camping. I've never been across the country. And so it was really spectacular. Go across Niagara Falls, the Tetons, the Black Hills of South Dakota. Just getting to see the sights. But by the time we get to Yellowstone Park, I'm starting to get itchy to get to California. And they're going to take another 2 weeks going through Oregon, and I just want to get there. So I talked to them. They don't really need me to drive. It's okay with them. And so it's the 60s. You can hitchhike. I'm adventurous. And there's a crowd gathered around Old Faithful, naturally. And so I just started asking people, hey, anybody driving to the San Francisco area? And this woman says, yeah, we're driving. And she's strangely serious. So out of the blue, I am about to have more than transportation to San Francisco. Yeah, we're going. Can you drive? Yeah, I can drive. Meet us at the lodge at 5 o'clock. So I go over to the lodge at Yellowstone at 5 o'clock, and she's waiting at the passenger door of a van, motioning me to get in. And I get in, and I turn to the driver, who's a kind of wiry guy with stubbly beard, and hold out my hand to, introduce myself, and his hand goes up. He's assigning me a name. He said, you're some odd name, Nuclear. And I think, okay, this is going to be strange. I bought the ticket, and I'm going to take the ride. Okay. And so we start driving, and so the woman gets in the back. There's another woman in the back. And he starts talking about, yeah, we got this family, and we have this bus, and we go back and forth across the country. And, okay. And somewhere, hours later, we're way out of civilization. We get a flat. And the spare is flat. Okay. This is starting to be an adventure. So I'll volunteer. Yeah, I'll hitch someplace with a spare. No. And he's barking an order to one of the women to go hitch and get the spare. Go get the spare fixed. Meanwhile, he's making love to the other woman in the back. And I'm just sitting in the front seat. Okay, I'll get there. Well, the spare gets fixed, and he puts it on, and it's getting towards evening time. And I look over the gas meter, and it's getting close to empty. So I reach into my pocket, like, hey, okay, let's go get some gas. I'll kick in. And the hand goes up again. So these people don't believe in buying gasoline. And he pulls off at an exit and proceeds to an unlit parking lot. And he barks an order to one of the women, get the hose! And he starts to take off the gas cap. and siphon gas out of a gas tank. And now, I'm no goody two-shoes, but to me, this is like reprehensible. But I'm starting to get the sense that these people are dangerous. Now, this is also 1969, and I had long hair, and we're like 40 miles out of Salt Lake City, and I'm wondering, okay, if I just leave, am I going to be more in trouble in Salt Lake City? And he looks at me and says, you ever do this before? Oh, I'm stuck. No, I never did it before. And then, okay, this is the worst thing I ever did. So I siphoned gas out. And that was really the most, let's say the nadir of the trip. And we proceed, and I noticed he's got this authoritarian thing with the women, but no other events till we get to the San Francisco area, and they're going to Oakland, and I'm going into San Francisco. Okay, and he drops me off at the bridge, the Bay Bridge, and I stick up my thumb and I get a ride in, and I don't know San Francisco yet, so where you want to go? Well, how about the corner of Haight and Ashbury? And I'm looking, so I got a list of people that I have known or somebody else knew, and I'm looking for a phone booth, and along comes a long-haired couple. Hey, you look like you need a place to stay. So it's from this bizarre thing to, I'm in a crash pad, and there's a very cool FM radio playing, and it's 180 degrees. So is this a story? Well, later that spring, the headlines break. The Sharon Tate murder, a cult leader, and I'm looking at it doesn't really hit me yet, but I look at a picture of this guy, short, wiry, crazy eyes. And sometime thereafter, I'm actually living on the West Coast, and I meet somebody who actually had encounters with Charlie Manson. And he's talking about the authoritarian thing he has with women and their school bus. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. So I tell people, in fact, this is how I got into storytelling. I'll tell people that I took a ride with Charlie Manson, and I don't know for sure that it was Charlie Manson, okay? The wiring, the stature, everything was the same, but I haven't written to him in prison saying, hey, Charlie, remember that? But I'm just glad I'm here. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Harry. Siphoning gas at Charlie Manson, that's a hell of a story. We kind of have a theme going on here of sort of people right on the cusp of getting into a lot more serious trouble. Out of the blue, an adorable little purple finch grabbed hold of my kitchen screen and stared at me as if to say, let me in. It came back a couple of times, so I decided to nail a small, flat form to the covered entry by the kitchen. I did the right thing, it seems. The finch and its mate built a nest on that tiny platform and put several tiny eggs in the nest, and the eggs hatched, and we watched out our kitchen window as the birds grew and grew and finally got literally pushed out of the nest by their parents, out of the blue. Wow, great story. Could we get Diane Schufro to the stage, please?
Thank you. So, about out of the blue, about 10 minutes ago, I put my name in the hat. So, preparation, no, I haven't done any. But today's September 11th, and I kind of have a September 11th story. In July of 2001, I was in Colorado with my husband, and we were traveling around, and we were in Telluride, which is just a really beautiful place. And it was the summer, but you can still ride the chairlifts. They let you ride the chairlift, and they let you get off at the top and walk around, and it was a gorgeous summer night. And we got off at the top, and there was no one else around, and it was absolutely beautiful, and it was twilight, and there were flowers, and my husband was taking pictures, and there were hummingbirds. And he was running around and he was trying to photograph the hummingbirds. And I was kind of laughing at him. I thought it was funny. It was cute. So we had a lovely time. That was the end of that. We went home. And those were the days, I'm sure most of you remember, when you actually took pictures on film and you would send the film away or take the film to the drugstore, and it took a while and you'd get it back and you got pictures. So it took a while, and sometime in September, I got the pictures back, and you know, I think a lot of us think in terms of sort of before and after. So we got the pictures back after, and I was looking at them and I was thinking, wow, it was before, and everything was so beautiful and it was innocent, and I kind of, it was a moment in time. Okay, so fast forward a few years later, maybe 3 or 4 years later, my husband and I were again on a beautiful spot on Block Island. And again, it was twilight, and we found ourselves on a point where there's a lighthouse, and it's a gorgeous spot. No one was around, and I was sitting on this beautiful bench, and my husband again was running around with his camera, and there were butterflies. And he was trying to photograph the butterflies. And I was thinking, I said, wow, this really reminds me of that night in Telluride, that beautiful, innocent, beautiful time when we were watching the flowers, and it was before, and here we are, and it's after, and I got, you know, kind of melancholy. But it was beautiful. And I was sitting on this beautiful granite bench, and at some point I noticed that there was a name on the front of the bench. And I started walking around it. There was a name of a woman, and on one side it said mother, daughter. On the other side it said sister, friend. And on the back it had the date of her birth and the date of her death, which was September 11th, 2001. So anyway, that's my story, and I know it's kind of a sad one, but it is September 11th, and we can just remember for a minute. And that's all I got.
Oh, thanks, Diane. That's I love first-time storytellers who just get moved by the moment and come on up here. It's a great thing. Pull another one of these here. Out of the blue, I was asked to come film this show. Who could that have been? Out of the blue, I was checking out a nursing home for my father. It was circle time for the residents. The ward had a pet bird, not a parakeet, something smaller. I was enchanted with the little bird flitting around, and then it landed on my shoulder and chattered frantically in my ear. It wanted me to take it away, but of course I could not. I still feel so guilty for not coming through for that little bird who was so desperate. Oh, I like that story. Could we get Beth Klingman to the stage, please?
Can I just take it down? Hi. On October 29th, 1996, my husband suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. And the results of this were that he was in the hospital and in rehab for almost 3 months. So that first week, as I sat outside the ICU, you know, waiting for him to hopefully come out of the coma that he was in, I was incredibly scared, probably as scared as I ever was in my entire life. I was feeling very fragile. I had no idea what his future functioning was going to look like. I had no idea what kind of deficits he was going to have. I knew three things, and I knew these things in my heart. I knew this man was going to come home and live with me. There was some talk about nursing homes, and I said, no, 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 that's not going to happen. He's coming home, he's going to live with me. I knew that I would provide whatever care he needed, and I knew that we were going to go on and have a good life. These are those things that you just know in your soul. So time goes on, and he's getting therapy, and he's in the hospital, and he's in rehab, and so fast forward to a couple of months, January 1st, 1997. It's New Year's Day, and he's been in the hospital now 2 months and rehab. And I had visited him that day, and he was slated to come home in a couple of weeks. So I had visited him during the day, and I was now on the Green Line coming home from visiting him. And I was thrilled that they were talking about release and that he'd be coming home. But again, I was so scared and feeling so fragile. And I really had no idea what his functioning was going to be. But again, I knew those three things. He's coming home, I'm going to take care of him, and we're going to have a good life. So I'm sitting on the Green Line feeling all these things, and the train stops, and this young woman kind of gets on the train. And even though there are a lot of empty seats, she sits next to me. And she just starts chatting. And she tells me she's a young actress, and she is in rehearsal at the Huntington Theater Company, where she is going to be starring as Laura in The Glass Menagerie. And she says, oh, you must come see the play. And I'm kind of just sitting there feeling scared and numb, but I'm kind of, acknowledging her presence. And then she just tells me a story. Out of the blue, she just tells me that her closest friend is also an actor. And she went on to say, oh, I was so worried about her because this woman's husband just had to have his leg amputated. Well, I've been so worried about them, but you'll never guess what happened. I got a Christmas card from them. And you won't believe what the Christmas card was. It was a cartoon of Santa Claus leaving a prosthetic leg under the tree. Well, when I got that, I just knew, they're going to be fine. Oh, it's my stop. Gotta go. Happy New Year. And she was gone. I sat there for a moment, and I wanted to scream out, excuse me, did anyone see a young woman sitting next to me? But I didn't, because with everything I've been going through, I still believe that my grasp on reality was pretty good. So I realized this woman was sent to give me a message, to bring me a sign that things were going to be okay. So a few weeks later, my husband was released, and he did have a lot of medical problems, and he had deficits, but for the next 17 years of his life, until the day he passed away, he was able to live at home with me. I was able to provide all of his care, and we had a happy, good life together. Thank you.
Yeah, give it up. The hat is empty unless we have any latecomers. Never too late. You can throw the name in. But I'll finish it off. I'll tell you one more story. One day, probably about 20 years ago, completely out of the blue, I and my wife and our good friend Scott decided to start an art museum. And about 2 years ago, the London Times published a list of the 50 best museums, art museums in the world. Number one was the Louvre, the Prado, all the ones, the Uffizi Gallery, the Tate. The only Boston art museum that made that list was our art museum. And I want to tell you that story. So my friend Scott, I've known him forever. And as long as I've known him, he's been a trash picker. Now, when I say trash picker, he's not going through your old coffee grinds. It's not that kind of thing. He deals in collectibles and antiques. And he goes to auctions and flea markets. He does house clearances, eBay, all this kind of stuff. But as long as I've known him, he always goes out a couple of nights a week trash picking. And what this is, he lives in West Roxbury. And in the city of Boston, you can put anything out in the trash and they haul it away. It's not like the Newton thing with the bucket. So, he drives around on the trash nights. He knows the schedule in every neighborhood. And looking for the house that has, 35 bags out in front of it. And that means somebody's clearing out a house. Somebody died, somebody's moving, something like that. And that's where you're going to find, all this, stuff thrown out. And over the years, he's pulled amazing things out of the trash, worth serious money. But one night, he came over to our house, and he had been out trash picking, and he said, you got to see this thing. And he brought in a painting. He said, I was looking for a frame, and I stopped and grabbed this frame, and this painting was in it. And it was this very stern-looking woman, and she simultaneously appeared to be sitting in a chair and floating over a field of fluorescent flowers. It was a really bizarre painting. And he said, I find stuff like this regularly. It's kind of horrible, but I kind of love it. And, there's just this weird painting. So I said, well, if you find any more of these, bring them by. And he said, well, what are you going to do with them? I said, I don't know. You just bring them by. So, the months went by, and every few weeks, Scott would come over with another painting he had found in a thrift store or somewhere. And we started collecting these things. And pretty soon, our living room started to look very strange. We had all these odd paintings. And a few months after that, we moved to a new house, and the house is in great shape. So the first week, we painted the basement white, and we hung all these paintings. And we gave them all names, and my wife Mari wrote little blurbs describing each painting. And then we had a housewarming party. And when all our friends and family came to the party, they were immediately ushered down into the basement and welcomed to the Museum of Bad Art. And so that was the start of this thing. So people had a great time. They loved the paintings. And maybe 3 months later, we had another party. And by this point, we had more paintings. We could have a new thing. And this party, all of a sudden, we had a ton of people. Everybody came to the first one. All our friends brought all these other people. You got to see this thing. And, and we had this huge party with all these people coming to see this thing. And this thing was starting to build. Well, then from there, the people who came to the party are calling up, I saw this painting here, and the people are dropping things off. So at this point, I started posting things on the internet, looking for fine art news groups and printing these like cryptic things saying, the Museum of Bad Art is looking for spectacular and unique works of art. And of course, in a fine art group, that immediately, gets people talking. And then we started publishing this newsletter from like this fictional, as if the Museum of Bad Art was this very big institution, very big and bureaucratic, and a big nonprofit with departments and infighting in this. And so this newsletter started going out, and that kind of got an audience of its own, and people started forwarding that, and they kind of liked this thing. Well, somehow that got into the hands of somebody who wrote for Wired magazine. So this guy from Wired magazine called up and interviewed us and wrote a little piece, maybe quarter page about the Museum of Bad Art. Well, somebody from the Wall Street Journal read that, and then they called up and they wanted to come. Now, I never knew this. I don't read the Wall Street Journal, but apparently every day on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, there's kind of a goofy story. You don't think of the Wall Street Journal that way, but it's like a kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, a kind of a fun story in the middle of the front page. And anybody who works for the newspaper can submit a story for that, prime spot. So this guy, he was just moving to Boston. And he thought this would be an opportunity for him to get a story in there. So he spent an inordinate amount of time interviewing us and everything about the whole museum and artists and this and that. And the last thing he said to us is, I hope you're ready for what's going to happen when this is on the newspaper. And we said, what do you mean? And he said, you'll see. So about a week later, all of a sudden, the newspaper comes out. There it is on the front page. This is great. And the phone starts ringing. The phone rings nonstop for about 48 hours. As fast as we can take these messages and get back to them, more are coming in. Every media outlet in the country, every TV station, radio station, magazine, newspaper, foreign, all over Europe, Australia, everybody's calling. And we are completely overwhelmed, and we start setting up interviews. And pretty soon, we quickly get this whole persona going on. I'm the executive director. I always wear this tuxedo. My buddy Scott, he's the esteemed curator. He's snooty and wears a black turtleneck. And Mari is the director of aesthetic interpretation, and she goes off on these lofty descriptions of the paintings. Well, we start having a blast, but it gets out of control. Now, once all the media starts going all over the world, people start sending stuff. So I'd come home from work, and there'd be boxes and boxes on the front step, and inside were paintings from all over the world with hysterically funny letters from people who were submitting these things. At this point, it just got out of control. It took over our lives, but we were having just too much fun. So we started, like anything we wanted to do, we would call people up and say, you know, we called up a car wash. We said, we're from the Museum of Bad Art. Oh, we love the Museum of Bad Art. I go, great, we want to use your car wash for night. And they're like, sure, no problem. So we ran the world's first drive-through art gallery and car wash. You know, and you know, then we had a problem with the paintings were coming in so fast and furious, and we only accepted a small fraction into the collection. We had our standards; they were very, very low. And so the reject pile, you know, was getting to be a problem. Our entire basement was full of the paintings. And we didn't feel like we could just throw them out. People had taken the trouble to send them to us. And we're like, what are we going to do with these? So at the time, the Dedham Mall was kind of this sad mall that was falling on hard times. It's coming up to Christmas. We call up the Dedham Mall. We said, we're from the Museum of Bad Art. Oh, we love the Museum of Bad Art. And we go, great. We want a storefront for a night. And so they give us the storefront. And we auction off our reject pile for the Salvation Army. We raised a couple $1,000 selling paintings not bad enough for the Museum of Bad Art. And on and on and on it went. For the next 2 years, we just had too much fun with this. But after about 2 years, we said, you know, this really has like... it's kind of like the joke that won't end, and it had taken over our lives. So we kind of walked away from it. But my sister decided she would keep it going. It's still going to this day, 20 years later. And 2 years ago, it did make the list of the top 50. It was number 50, but the top 50 museums in the world. So there you go. So can we get all the storytellers up here? Come on, bring the storytellers up. I know a few of them left, but... Get Robert up here. No, we get a few more here. All right. Come on up here, yeah. So our entertainment tonight, the storytellers. Thank you. And thank you. There you go. Great. So sign up for our email list. Come to see our next show. It's right over there. And thank you all for coming.